Sibling fights, separations, unexpected death, power struggles. They marked their name in the history of world music. However, the ego of its members destroyed one of the most iconic bands in the world of rock. Get to know the untold story of Creedence Clearwater Revival, one of the true powerhouses of classic rock and roll, undeniably one of the most influential and beloved bands in music history. Some of their unforgettable hits include Bad Moon Rising. Have You Ever Seen the Rain? And
Have you ever seen rain?
Down on the Corner.
Out in the street, filling the poor boys are playing, bringing nickel happy.
Their songs are timeless and continue to be heard on radios, movie soundtracks, and around the world. Creedence Clearwater Revival, commonly abbreviated as CCR, was formed in 1967 in El Cerrito, California. It consisted of John Fogerty on vocals and guitar, Tom Fogerty on rhythm guitar, Stu Cook on bass, and Doug Clifford on drums. They gained worldwide recognition with a series of hits that became an essential part of the rock and roll soundtrack. Creedence's distinctive sound blended elements of rock, country, blues, and folk, creating a unique sound that captivated generations of fans. John's distinctive voice and his songwriting ability are fundamental parts of the band's lasting legacy. Although Creedence had a relatively short career, ending in 1972, their music continues to be appreciated and celebrated by fans of all ages. The band is often cited as one of the most important influences in the development of rock and roll, and is also remembered as one of the greatest bands of all time. John, Doug, and Stu Cook crossed paths at a California school. It was a time of dreams and musical passions, and these talented young people decided to unite under the name the Blue Velvets. The trio played instrumental music and mastered the jukebox classics. The artistic life of the trio gained special shine when they started collaborating with Tom, John's older brother, on recordings and performances. It was as if the harmony of the family translated into the music they produced together. The big break came when Casey Kasem, who worked at Cubby Radio in Oakland, fell in love with one of the band's singles. His influence and support opened doors to a promising future for these young talents. In 1964, fate smiled on them once again when they signed a contract with Fantasy Records, a respected independent jazz label from San Francisco. The label made this decision after hearing an incredible recording of Vince Guaraldi, titled Cast Your Fate to the Wind, which they successfully released nationwide. It was the beginning of a musical journey that would mark the band's history. For their first release, Max Weiss, co-owner of Fantasy, decided to rename the band the Gollywogs, a tribute to the children's literary character Gollywog. Before this name, Weiss had already renamed the group Vision. During this period, there were changes in the roles of the band members. Cook switched from piano to bass, and Tom left vocals to take over rhythm guitar. It was at this moment that John became the lead vocalist and the primary songwriter of the band. In Tom's words, he said the following, "I could sing, but John had something special." In 1966, John and Doug were called to serve in the United States Armed Forces. John joined the United States Army Reserve, while Doug joined the United States Coast Guard Reserve. Over time, John took over the leadership of the band, becoming the lead vocalist and demonstrating his skills as a multi-instrumentalist, playing keyboard, harmonica, saxophone, as well as lead guitar. In 1967, Saul Zaentz bought Fantasy Records and offered the band the chance to record an album. A curiosity here is the following. They hated the name the Gollywogs from the beginning, since it was created, and in January 1968, they chose the new name Creedence Clearwater Revival, or CCR, and began playing at local clubs in San Francisco, such as Dino and Carlo's Avalon Ballroom and Fillmore West. Later that year, they toured the United States and performed in New York with Creedence's version of Jay Hawkins's song Susie Q.
Like the way you walk. I like the way you...
They gained prominence on radios across the country, and the Creedence invasion was indeed beginning. It was the band's second single and the first to reach the top 40. Two other singles from the debut album were also released in May 1968, I Put a Spell on You and Porterville. After being discovered, the band embarked on a series of tours and began working on their second album, Bayou Country, released in January 1969 at RCA Studios in Los Angeles. This album reached an incredible platinum milestone, number 7, and was the beginning of a sequence of successful albums and singles that lasted uninterrupted for 2 years. The single Proud Mary, along with Born on the Bayou, reached the second place on the national Billboard chart. Interestingly, Proud Mary would become the most covered song of the group, with about 100 versions by other artists to date, including the 1971 hit by Ike and Tina Turner, which reached number 4. John attributed the creation of this song to his high spirits after receiving his discharge from the Army Reserve. John further stated in an interview in 1969 that he wrote Proud Mary in the 2 days after being discharged from the National Guard. In another interview, he claimed to have written it on the same day of his discharge. The album also included a remake of the rock and roll classic Good Golly Miss Molly, and an incredible 9-minute live track called Keep On Chooglin'. In April 1969, they released Bad Moon Rising and also Lodi. Bad Moon Rising managed to reach the top spot in the UK but fell just short of the top spot in the United States, peaking at number 2. But that was already good, right? The song speaks about the impending apocalypse and the feeling that something terrible is about to happen. Creedence's third second-place song was Travelin' Band. And there was also Who'll Stop the Rain. They were released together as a double-sided single that almost reached the top of the Billboard Hot 100 in 1970. Travelin' Band is an energetic song that depicts the hectic life of a touring band, while Who'll Stop the Rain reflects the social and political climate of the late 1960s and early 1970s, with references to the Vietnam War and politics. The band's third album, Green River, released in August 1969, marked a major achievement as the first to top the Billboard 200 and earned gold certification. The single Green River also reached the second position on the Billboard charts. The B-side of Green River, titled Commotion, reached position 30 on the charts. The band continued its series of recording old favorite hits with the song Nighttime is the Right Time, and maintained a busy touring schedule at the Atlanta Pop Festival in July 1969, and also at the Woodstock Festival in August of the same year. However, their performance at Woodstock was not included in the film or the event's soundtrack because John felt the band wasn't at their best that day. Nonetheless, 4 tracks from their show were later included in the 1994 commemorative box set, Woodstock 3 Days of Peace and Music. While John had a critical view, Stu Cook had a different perspective, stating that Creedence's performances were classics and lamenting that many people were unaware that they were one of the main attractions of the festival. After this festival, Creedence kept busy working on their 4th album, Willie and the Poor Boys, which would be released in November 1969 and became their second LP to reach the top 3 on the charts. 2 of their singles, Down on the Corner and Fortunate Son, played on The Ed Sullivan Show on November 16, 1969, reached the 3rd and 14th spots on the charts, respectively. By the end of the year, the album maintained the band's characteristic formula, featuring original songs by John and 2 revised covers by Lead Belly, Cotton Fields, and Midnight Special. The year 1969 was exceptional for the band in the music charts, with 3 albums in the top 10 and 4 successful singles, 3 of which reached the second place, along with 3 B-sides on the charts. In January 1970, the band released the double A-side hit Travelin' Band and Who'll Stop the Rain, with the former song having a strong Little Richard vibe, but ended up causing legal trouble due to similarities with Good Golly Miss Molly, leading to an out-of-court settlement. The song ultimately reached the second place on the charts. In April 1970, Creedence was ready for their first European tour and then released Up Around the Bend
We're going up around the bend.
and Run Through the Jungle.
Through the jungle. Better run through the jungle.
To support the live shows. These songs reached the 4th position on the charts that spring. The band then returned to Wally Heider Studios in San Francisco in June to record Cosmo's Factory, which included the hits Travelin' Band and Up Around the Bend, along with other standout tracks. Released in July 1970, Cosmo's Factory topped the charts in the United States for 9 weeks and was accompanied by the band's 5th and final national hit, Lookin' Out My Back Door.
Looking out my back door. This giant doing cartwheels.
And Long As I Can See the Light.
As I can see the light.
Creedence holds the record for having had 5 singles at the second place, the highest number for any group. The album became a bestseller, reaching the top spot on the Billboard 200 chart and the 11th spot on the Billboard Soul Albums chart. Already in December 1970, the band released Pendulum, another successful album that included Have You Ever Seen the Rain?
Have you ever seen the rain?
And also Hey Tonight.
Tonight. Gonna be tonight.
During this period, a sensation among the other band members that John was exerting excessive control and leadership was about to explode. Tom made the decision that he had reached his limit and left Creedence in early 1971. Initially, the remaining members considered the possibility of replacing him, but chose to continue as a trio. In the spring of 1971, John, tired of constant complaints from his remaining bandmates, who claimed they were not allowed to compose and produce their own songs, also changed course. He informed the other members that Creedence would adopt a democratic approach. Each member would now have the right to write and also perform their own songs, with everyone contributing 3 songs to the next album. There are different perspectives on how Cook and Clifford reacted to this new proposed agreement. While it is agreed that both desired more involvement in the band's artistic and commercial decisions, John claims that initially Cook and Clifford were enthusiastic about the opportunity to create and perform their own songs without interference, as they had requested initially, and only changed their minds after the album's lack of success. However, other sources suggest that both Cook and Clifford resisted this approach from the beginning. Supposedly, at one point, Fogerty insisted that they accept the agreement or he would leave the band. Despite the conflicts, the trio put their new work ethic to the test in the studio and released the single Sweet Hitchhiker in July 1971, which reached the top 10, along with Cook's Door to Door. The band embarked on a tour of the United States and Europe that summer and fall, including Cook's songs in their live repertoire. Despite commercial success, the relationships between the three became increasingly tense. The band's final album, Mardi Gras, was released in April 1972. This album had a different flavor, with songs written by John, Cook, and Clifford, as well as a cover of Hello, Mary Lou. Each member took lead vocals on the songs they composed, giving each track a unique touch. However, this album was not exactly what everyone expected. It was met with mixed reviews, many considering it uneven and lacking a clear identity. Rolling Stone critic John Landau was especially harsh, calling the album the worst album ever released by a major rock band in relation to its performance standard. Sales also did not reach the levels of previous albums, only reaching the second place on the charts. However, despite the criticism and modest sales, the album still managed to achieve gold certification. At this point, tensions among the band members were escalating. John was not only at odds with his bandmates, but also dissatisfied with the group's relationship with Fantasy Records. He believed that the label owner had broken his promise to offer a better contract to the band. Cook, who had knowledge in administration, stated that due to John's misjudgments, Creedence ended up accepting one of the worst recording contracts among major American artists. Despite the tensions, Creedence decided to embark on a 2-month tour with 20 shows in the United States that year. The band performed songs from the album Mardi Gras, live with a new dynamic where each member had their voice in their own creations. However, the fate of the band was sealed. On October 16, 1972, less than 6 months after the end of the tour, Fantasy Records and the band officially announced their dissolution. Creedence never formally reunited after the breakup. Although Cook and Clifford eventually formed Creedence Clearwater Revisited, the chapter of Creedence's history was closed, but their music would continue to echo for generations. John would later reflect on the end of Creedence in an interview with the Swedish magazine Pop in 1997. He said the following, "I was completely alone. Alone. I made the arrangements, added the backing vocals, the guitars, and all the details. Alone. I produced, mixed the albums. The other guys only showed up at rehearsals and recording days. To me, the band was like sitting on a time bomb. We had reasonable success with our cover of Susie Q and also with the first album. When we entered the studio to record Proud Mary, it was the first time we were in a big studio in Hollywood, the RCA studio in Los Angeles, and the problems started immediately. The other band members wanted to write music for the new album. They had opinions on the arrangements and insisted on singing. They even tried to add backing vocals to Proud Mary, but the results were terrible. They used tambourines and didn't improve anything. That's when I realized I had a choice to make. We were just a band with a single hit, and Susie Q hadn't been a big success. Either the new album would be a big hit, or it was better for us to go back to washing cars. There was a big discussion. We sat in an Italian restaurant, and I remember being very clear with the others. At least I didn't want to go back to washing cars. Now we needed to make the best album possible. It didn't matter who did what, as long as the result was the best it could be. Of course, it fell to me. I don't think the others really understood what I meant, but at least I managed the situation my way. The result was 8 million consecutive double-sided singles sold and 6 albums, all platinum. The Melody Maker considered us the best band in the world. That was after the Beatles split up, but still. And I was the one who created all of that. Despite that, I think they didn't understand what I was saying. They were obsessed with the idea of more control and influence. So finally, the bomb exploded, and we never worked together again. In 1973, John Fogerty began his solo career with the Blue Ridge Rangers, a collection of country and gospel songs. However, under his former contract with Creedence, he still owed Fantasy Records 8 more albums. Ultimately, John refused to continue working with the record label. The situation was only resolved when David Geffen of Asylum Records bought John's contract for $1 million in 1975. He released his only album for Asylum, self-titled John Fogerty. However, during the 1986 tour, John faced constant complaints for his refusal to play Creedence songs and also recurring vocal problems, which he attributed to testifying in court. John's explanation for not playing Creedence material was that he would have to pay performance royalties to Saul Zaentz, the copyright holder, and that it was too painful to revisit the music of his past. Meanwhile, Tom released several solo albums, but none achieved the success of Creedence. Tom Fogerty passed away at his home in Arizona in September 1990 due to complications from AIDS that he contracted through a blood transfusion during back surgery. Tom and John barely reconciled before Tom's death, and in the eulogy John gave at Tom's funeral, he said, "We wanted to grow up and be musicians. I guess we got half of that right, becoming rock and roll stars. We didn't necessarily grow up." Longtime friends Doug and Stu Cook continued to work together after Creedence disbanded, both as session musicians and members of the Don Harrison Band. They also founded Factory Productions, a mobile recording service in the Bay Area. The original lineup of Creedence reunited only once after the breakup, at Tom's wedding on October 19, 1980. In the 1980s and 1990s, new rounds of lawsuits between band members, as well as against their former managers, further deepened their animosities. When Creedence was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993, John refused to perform with Cook and Clifford, and the duo was barred from the stage. Tom's widow, Tricia, hoped for a Creedence reunion and even brought her husband's ashes in an urn to the ceremony. Furious, Cook and Clifford, who were sitting with their families at a table on the other side of the room, left the ballroom as soon as John's performance began. Later, they wrote separate letters to the board of directors of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, saying it was painful and insulting to allow the performance to continue without them. In an interview in July 2011, John admitted that he would at least consider a reunion with Cook and Clifford. When asked again in October 2011 about the prospect of a reunion, he said, "So I'm saying it's possible, yes. I think the connection, maybe it would have to come from outside the realm. Someone would have to take me to look at things in a new way." However, Cook and Clifford stated in the February 2012 issue of Uncut magazine that they are not interested in a reunion. In Creedence, leopards don't change their spots. That's just a bit of John's image polishing. "My phone certainly didn't ring," Cook said. Clifford added, "It might have been a good idea 20 years ago, but now it's too late." Creedence was an iconic band that left a lasting mark on the history of rock and roll. Their songs continue to be appreciated by fans of all ages, and their legacy endures. If you have memories or favorite songs from this band, share them with us in the comments. Music has the power to transport us back in time and evoke special memories, and Creedence certainly did that for many people. Friends, thank you once again. Here we end today's video. It was great spending this time with you. I'll see you in our next video. Big